Hey guys, in this video we're going to create our database with its tables, and we're also going to implement the database library or the database class so that we can easily create queries and run them. Okay, so I'm going to go to phpMyAdmin, and if you've been following along and you installed XAMPP or XAMPP, then just go to localhost/phpMyAdmin. Alright, and I'm going to go to databases and create a new database. Actually, we already have one named PHP Lovers Blog. So I'm going to, this one I'm just going to call blog. Alright, so we need two tables. The first is going to be the post table. I believe there's 7 fields. Okay, so we're going to have an ID, which is going to be an integer. Max will be 11 characters. And this is going to be our primary key. And it's also going to auto increment. Alright, next we want the category. Now this is going to be a foreign key field for the categories table with ID row. So they're basically going to be connected. We'll have 11 characters. Okay, next we want the post title, which is going to be a varchar, and we'll put 255 max. Body for the post body is going to be text. Okay, we'll leave the length blank. Next we'll have the author. Now, if this was a big production app, chances are you would have an authors or users table that you would link this to. But in this case, it's just going to be text. It's going to be the author's name. It's not going to be a foreign key ID or anything like that. All right. Next is tags, which will just be a string, comma separated values. That can be a varchar 255. And then the last one is going to be a date, and actually a timestamp. And we're going to set the default to current timestamp, which will automatically insert the current time when that record goes into the database. Okay, so that's good. Click Save. Next, we want to create the categories table, which is extremely small. It's only 2 columns. Okay, we're basically just going to have an ID and a name. Okay, ID, integer. It's going to auto increment primary key, and then the name is going to be varchar 255. Alright, so that's our entire database. What I want to do now is just insert some records in there just so we have something to experiment with in the front end. Okay, so I'm going to go to Insert. I'm going to click on Categories and Insert. Okay, so the ID is auto increment, so we're not going to put in an ID. We just need some names. So we'll say news, events. Actually, that's good, yeah. Okay, news and events. We'll put 2 more in. Let's put tutorials and miscellaneous. Alright, so we get our categories. Now posts, click on that, click insert, and category, we'll say 1. Let's just grab the content we have here. Let's see, I'll grab this international conference for the title. The body, let's grab these paragraphs. It's a long paragraph. Okay, so I'll copy that. And you can see that it does have the paragraph tags. Oh, I left one off the end. Okay, I'm just going to copy this because they're all going to have the same body. Okay, author, be myself. Tags, let's just say PHP news, PHP event. Okay, the next one, we'll put it in the same category, and this will be PHP 5.6.0 beta released. Okay, so let's put those in. Alright, so now we have 4 categories and we have 2 posts that are both in category 1. Okay, so that gives us something to work with. So what we want to do now is we want to create our database class. So let's first go to config. Okay, our config PHP class, and let's create our database credentials and assign them to a constant. A constant is like a variable, it's a placeholder, but the difference is that a constant doesn't change. Alright, it's constant. It's always the value that you set it at. Alright, and usually set them in some kind of configuration file. Okay, so what we need to do is open up a PHP tag. Alright, and we're going to say define. Okay, so we want 2 parameters here. The first is going to be the name of the constant, which I'm going to put db, and typically constants are always uppercase. Alright, not typically, pretty much always uppercase. Alright, so that's going to be db host, and then we want the value, which we're going to set to localhost. Okay, so we're just going to define all our parameters like this. Okay, the next one we want is db user. Okay, so I'm going to put my MySQL username. Okay, next we'll have db pass, and I'm going to put in my simple password. Okay, and then we're going to have db name, which is going to be the name of the database. In my case is blog. Alright, so that's basically all we're going to have in the config file. But it's even if you have nothing, it's good to have a configuration file in case you want to set something in the future. Alright, so make sure you save that, and let's open up the database class or a library. When I say library or class, I'm talking about the same thing, really. Alright, so now we're going to get into object-oriented programming. Alright, so in object-oriented programming you have what's called a class. I'm going to give you a really quick, very simple example. Build objects. If you're a seasoned PHP developer, then you can just skip through this part. Alright, so I'm going to use an easier analogy as opposed to what we're going to actually be doing. Let's say we have a class called dog. Alright, so in this class we can define properties, also called attributes, of the dog, like its color, its what else about a dog? Its breed, alright, its color, its breed, things like that. And then we can also define methods, which are basically functions inside of a class. Alright, so function and method, the word can be used interchangeably. Alright, so a method would be bark, lay down, eat. Alright, so all actions, those would be methods. Alright, so if we want to define a property, then we can say public color. Alright, so the public is an access identifier. Basically, there's 3 levels. There's public, protected, and private. All right, so public means that even if we're not working from within this dog class and we're in another file or whatever, we can access this color attribute, all right, even from outside the class. If we set it to protected, then we can only access it from this class as well as any classes that it extends, all right, or any classes that extends the dog class, okay, because you can actually do extensions. We could do maybe a class Rottweiler and extend it from this class of dog. And if this is protected, then we'd be able to use color inside of the Rottweiler class as well. All right, and then the last one is private. Okay, so if it's private, you can't access it from outside, and you can't even access it from a class that is extended from dog. All right, so we wouldn't even be able to use this in the Rottweiler class. All right, I hope that makes sense. And when you define them, you can do this, what we're doing here. I'm actually going to keep this at private because, actually no I'm not, we need this public. Alright, so you could also say public equals, if you want to set a default, red. Alright, although I haven't seen too many red dogs. Alright, so that's a property. Okay, so the next thing we can assign is methods. Okay, so we can say public function bark. Alright, so this function, I guess we could say echo bark. Okay. Can't type today. Alright, so we have a class of dog, and we can set its color, and we can make it bark. Alright, so this is a really stupid example, but it's a really simple example. Alright, now with just this code here, it's not going to do anything. We're just defining a class. To use it, we could most likely be in another file. We're not going to use it from inside the class file. This is basically just the library where we define stuff. We'd use it in another file. And to use it, you'd have to include this database file, or dog, whatever this is, and then I don't need the PHP tags. You could create a variable called dog, and you could set that to new dog. Alright, so this is what this is doing, is assigning this variable a dog object from your class. Alright, and now that you have that object in that variable, you can call its properties or its methods. Alright, so we could say dog color equals black. Okay, and this is what you'll use to access the properties and methods. You use this little arrow. Okay, and then we could make it bark. We could say dog bark. Okay, and that would just echo out bark. So that's just a really simple example that I wanted to throw out there. Classes, properties, methods, objects. Okay, so those are the basic four aspects of this that you should know. Alright, so let's create our real class. Alright, so we're going to say class database, and we're going to have a few properties here. So we're going to have public host, public username, public password, and if you can recognize this list, we just created the constants that hold the actual values for these variables. Let's say db name, and we're actually going to set those up here as well. So db host, host is going to be equal to our db host constant, and you could just as well put the actual value inside of here, but it's not very good practice to do that, at least in my opinion. So we're just including the constants in this file for the values. So username will be db user, and the password will be db pass. All right, and then the db name. All right, so we're going to need a few other properties here as well. We'll say public public DB, and basically this is going to be a database handler. I'm sorry, no, we don't need that. We don't need public DB. We need a link. Okay, so the link is going to represent the MySQLi object, which I'll explain in a little bit. All right, and then I believe that's it. Oh, we're also going to have an error property for giving errors. All right, so that's it for the properties. Next, we want our methods. So in a class, you have something called a constructor, and a constructor is basically, it's a function that runs when you instantiate the class. All right, so if we have something in another file and we say db equals new database, just by instantiating it like this, we're going to call a constructor if we have one. All right, every other function you have to actually call. You'd have to say like db connect or something like that, but the constructor, it just calls automatically when you create the object. Okay, so we're going to create a constructor. So public function, and it has to be formatted like this. You need 2 underscores and then the word construct. Okay, so that's a constructor in PHP. All right, and what we want to do in this constructor is assign these variables to our class using this. Okay, so we're going to say this host is equal to host. Actually, we need to pass these values in. All these credentials we need to pass in here. Okay, host username, password, db name, and then we're just going to assign this host to host and this username to username. And the reason we do this is so we can access these from our entire class. Okay, they become class properties instead of just properties of this function. Okay, so this password is going to equal password. This db name equals db name. All right, and I just like to format this a little bit. All right, so there's one more thing we want to do here, and that is call a connect function, which we're going to create. And we can call it using this. All right, so whenever you want to, if you're in a function in the class and you want to call another function from this class, you use this. Same thing with the properties. Okay, so this is a very important keyword. All right, so let's create the connect. Actually, let's add some comments here. Okay, so class constructor. Call this connector. Actually, you know what? This is going to be a private function because we're calling it from within our class. Okay, we're calling it here. We're not going to be calling this from any other file. Okay, so we're going to use private function connect. Alright, now what we're going to do is assign this link to our connection. Alright, so we want to say new MySQLi. Okay, so this is the MySQLi API. Basically, this is just to connect. So we're going to pass in this host and this username. Password and this DB name. Okay, so we'll pass those in. And then we're going to make sure that we are connected. So we're going to do an if statement here. And basically we're just going to say if not this link. Okay, so if this link is not true, alright, if we connect here, then this link is going to be true. So we're going to say if it's false, then this error equals, and we're just going to put in an error string. We'll say connection failed, and then we can actually pass in we can say this link connect error, and this will give us the actual error, the actual MySQL error. Okay, and then of course we want to return false. So that's our connect class. I'm sorry, our connect function. So what I want to do now is actually try to connect. Alright, so I'm going to save this and go to my index PHP, and we need to first of all include the database class or file. So up at the top here we're going to include libraries slash database.php. Alright, so let's just make sure that includes okay. Alright, now it's not going to do anything until we actually create a database object. Alright, so I'm going to open a separate block down here, PHP block, and I'm going to create DB object. Alright, and like I showed you, we're going to have a variable which is going to be equal to new database. Alright, so we don't have to pass anything in here because we're actually, hold on a second, we made a mistake here. We do not need to do this. We can do this if we want to pass in all our parameters in the file here. Alright, so if we want to put all those in here, but I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to get rid of this. And this, and all we need is the connect function because those properties are already being set up here. I don't know why I did that. Alright, so that should at least give us an error if we're not connecting. Let's see, use of, oh, we need to include our config file as well. Okay, so config should be at the very top. Alright, so we don't have an error. Now to test this, we want to go in our database class. Actually, we'll go in our config, and let's just mess up this password. Okay, so I'll throw a character in there to trip it up. And now if we reload, we now get access denied for root at localhost. So it's not connecting now. Alright, so we know that if we have the correct password and we don't get an error, then we're connected. Alright, so now what we need to do is write a couple more functions or methods, whatever you want to call them, and then we can use it. We can use the database object. So let's create the we're going to create the select method, okay, to select from our database. Alright, so we're going to say public function select. Alright, now this is going to take in our query. Alright, and then what we're going to do is create a result variable, which is going to be equal to this link. Alright, this link is basically referring to our MySQLi object. Okay, so whatever we would do with this, we can do with this. Alright, so we're going to say this link query, which is basically like saying MySQLi query. And we're going to pass in the query that we passed in from the object. And then we're going to say or die. Okay, I know that's kind of violent, but it's got to die. Alright, and when it dies, we want to get a message of what happened, and we can do that like this. So error, and then line. Okay, so this should look familiar. We did this kind of stuff back in the quiz project. Alright, so we have that result. Now we're going to say if, we'll say if result num rows is greater than 0. Alright, so basically this returns how many rows it finds from the query. If we say select, let's select all from users, and then this would return however many users were found. Okay, so basically however many users are in that table. Alright, and if it's greater than 0, then we're just going to return our result. Okay, so then we can access that from outside. We're also going to put an else, and if there are no rows returned, then we're going to return false. Alright, so very simple. If you look at some database classes, whether it's MySQLi or PDO, they get really, really complicated. This is a very, very simple database class. Okay, so just know that they're usually a lot more in depth than this. Okay, so that's our select method. Now let's create our insert. Just put in some comments, make it look nice. Okay, insert is also going to take in a query variable, and basically we're going to say insert underscore row equals this link query. Okay, so I'm actually just going to grab this . Alright, and we want to validate the insert. So we're going to say if insert row. Okay, so if the row did in fact get inserted, then what do we want to do? What I'm going to want to do is just redirect. Alright, we want to redirect to the index page, well, the admin index page. These classes here, insert and our update class, are only going to be accessible through the admin area. Okay, so what we're going to do is just redirect. So we use the header function. Alright, so header location is going to be index.php. Now, when we're redirected after we insert it, we want to have a message displayed. Alright, and there's a few things you can do to achieve that. what I'm going to do is just include a get variable inside of the URL. Alright, so we'll just have something like MSG equals no, say record added. Alright, so then when we're actually redirected, actually let's just URL encode this. Okay, so we're just gonna use PHP to call a function called URL encode. Yeah, that's right. Alright. URL encode. Actually, you know what? Let's make these outer quotes double quotes. And then right here we need a dot. Alright, yeah, so that should encode this correctly. Alright, so when we're redirected, we'll have that variable that we can grab and we can print that out on the screen. Alright, so if the row doesn't insert, then we're just going to basically die and call an error. Okay, so I'm going to just throw this in here. Alright, something's still not right with this string here. Code. I think we just want to get rid of this quote in this period. Alright. So yeah, so if it doesn't insert, then we're just going to die and it's going to give us an error. Okay, so that's basically it for the insert. Update is going to be pretty similar, so I'm just going to copy this. Update. Okay, so update query. I'm going to change this to update row. It's going to call the query, and then we're going to validate it. And then for the message, we'll just say record updated. Alright, so actually after these headers, we just want to put an exit. Okay. And then the delete function, also very similar, so I'm just going to copy this. Okay, delete. So you can see this is a really simple database class. So that should be it, at least for now. We have select, insert, update, and delete. Alright, so if we need more later on, if we need to get the total or something like that from the database, we can add that as well. Alright, so I'm going to save that. And I'm going to end the video here. And then in the next one, we will test this out.